Imagine, just for a second, hiring a hitman.
Oh, okay, I am listening.
But instead of, like, a sniper rifle or something, his weapon of choice is a divine curse.
Wow, okay. That is a very specific, very terrifying type of hitman.
Right. So you are this terrified ancient king,
Yeah.
and you see this massive migrating nation just camped out on your lawn, basically.
Your literal front yard.
Exactly. And your solution is to pay an absolute premium for this world-renowned spiritual assassin to just wipe them out with a hex.
Which was a very real, very serious thing in the ancient world, by the way.
For sure. But here's the crazy part. The only thing that stops this highly trained, well-paid sorcerer from executing the contract is his donkey.
His donkey.
Yes, his donkey. The animal suddenly stops, turns around, and literally starts talking to him.
I mean, it sounds like a bizarre fable, honestly, or, some kind of weird fever dream.
It really does.
But it is actually one of the most important pieces of political and spiritual history in the ancient world.
And it's just one piece of a much larger, completely wild puzzle. So, welcome to this deep dive into the source material.
It is so good to be here.
We are looking at a text today that I think it carries this central, almost haunting question.
Oh, I like that. What is the question?
Why does human nature seem to just self-destruct the exact moment it achieves freedom?
Oh, man. That is heavy. But it is so true.
Right. I mean, you pray for a breakthrough, you finally get it, and then you immediately sabotage it.
We do it all the time.
We really do. Why do we do that? So we're going to explore that by looking at a part of the Bible that almost everyone skips, which is the book of Numbers.
Which is such a tragedy, honestly, because it is arguably the most psychologically complex and brutally honest book in the Torah.
The Torah being the first 5 books of the Bible.
Exactly. It is just so raw.
Okay, let's unpack this,
Ah.
because we have to address the elephant in the room right away.
The name itself.
Yes. The name Numbers sounds incredibly dry. I mean, it sounds like an ancient accounting ledger or something.
It really does. It sounds like math homework.
Yeah, you open it up expecting all this spiritual inspiration, and instead, you just hit what looks like a giant spreadsheet of ancient tribes and census data.
It can be super intimidating.
If you were doing one of those Bible in a year reading plans, this is usually where good intentions just go to die.
That is a very fair critique of the English title for sure, because the English name Numbers, well, it comes from the Greek translation of the Bible, the Septuagint.
Okay, why do they call it that?
Because the book features 2 major censuses. They literally count the people. But the original Hebrew name for this book is Bamidbar.
Bamidbar. Okay, what does that mean?
It translates directly to in the wilderness.
Oh, wow. That completely changes your expectation.
Right. It is not a book about math. It is a survival journal.
A survival journal. I love that.
Yeah, it is a documentary of a people wandering through a hostile, unforgiving wasteland.
In the wilderness.
Yeah.
That is so much better. And honestly, it frames exactly why we are doing this deep dive today.
It sets the whole mission for us.
Exactly. Because to you, listening right now, wherever you are, maybe you are commuting to work or staring at the window of a coffee shop, we are going to explore how these ancient stories from a literal, physical desert serve as a perfect mirror for your own life today.
Because we all have wilderness seasons. Every single one of us.
Yeah, seasons where that engineered, perfectly paved highway of our faith just suddenly vanishes.
And you are left in the murky, muddy waters of real life.
Exactly. So what is the core theme we are looking at here?
Well, throughout this text, we are presented with a very stark, uncomfortable contrast.
Uncomfortable how?
On one side, you have Israel's constant self-sabotage. I mean, their grumbling, their sheer terror, and their complete lack of trust in the God who literally just liberated them from slavery.
They just saw these massive miracles and they still complain.
All the time. And then on the other side, you have God's continuous, unmerited grace. He is constantly protecting a people who are actively trying to run away from him.
It is wild. So let's set the scene for everyone. We are starting exactly where the previous book, Leviticus, left off.
Right, at the base of the mountain.
Yeah. The Israelites have been rescued from brutal slavery in Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, and for the last year or so, they have just been parked at the foot of Mount Sinai.
And Mount Sinai was a huge, pivotal moment for them.
It was the wedding day, basically.
That is a great way to put it. God made a covenant with them. He gave them the law. He gave them a completely new identity as his people.
And the blueprint for the tabernacle, right?
Yes, the tabernacle.
Yeah.
This massive, ornate, portable tent where his own presence would dwell right in the absolute middle of their camp.
So before they pack up this tabernacle and move out into the wilderness of Paran, heading toward the promised land of Canaan, God tells Moses to take a census.
This is right in chapters 1 through 4.
He says, count all the fighting-age men. And I have to be completely honest with you, reading this part still feels like reading a phone book.
It really does bog you down if you do not know what is happening.
So why? Why are we starting this epic wilderness survival story with a spreadsheet?
It is a great question. It feels tedious to a modern reader, but you have to think about the massive psychological shift that is happening here.
Okay, shift from what to what?
For 400 years, these people were a subjugated, broken mob of slaves.
Right.
Their entire existence was dictated by the whips of Egyptian taskmasters. They had no autonomy, no structure of their own, no national identity.
They were just property.
Right.
Farm equipment.
Exactly. So taking a census isn't just about ancient logistics or, figuring out how many swords they have for a battle.
It is more than that.
It is an act of extreme dignity. God is counting them by name, by their tribes, by their ancestral houses.
Wow.
He is looking at them and saying, you are no longer a nameless mob of slaves. You are an ordered, recognized sovereign people. You are an army of the living God.
That reframes it completely for me. It is an identity-building exercise. He is giving them their personhood back.
Precisely. And this identity exercise actually dictates the literal geography of their camp.
The way they set up their tents.
Yes. The text describes this incredibly strict arrangement. The tabernacle, the absolute epicenter of God's presence, is situated perfectly in the center.
Right in the middle.
And surrounding it immediately are the Levites and the priests. And then radiating outward in these very specific quadrants are the 12 tribes.
With the tribe of Judah positioned at the head of the formation.
Exactly. Judah leads the way.
So I was reading through the source material on this layout, and I have a theory I want to bounce off you.
Oh, I love theories. Let's hear it.
We tend to look at this strict camp arrangement and all the intense purity laws carrying over from Leviticus, and we think of it like ancient hygiene.
Like God is just a neat freak or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or like it is early crowd control.
Yeah.
But I do not think it is that at all. I think the camp layout is more like the blueprint for a nuclear reactor.
A nuclear reactor. Okay, elaborate on that.
Think about it. A nuclear reactor is a source of immense, life-giving power for a city, right? It provides the energy for everything to function.
Sure.
But you do not just casually stroll into the reactor core in your flip-flops and a t-shirt.
No, definitely not. That would end very badly.
Exactly. There are incredibly strict protocols, hazard suits, and clearance levels. And it is not because the reactor is like mean or angry.
Right, it has no emotions.
It is because the sheer nature of that radioactive power is fundamentally incompatible with contamination. If you bring the wrong elements into that space, you will just be consumed by it.
That is a phenomenal way to understand ancient biblical holiness.
So all these rules, where Judah camps, where the Levites camp, it's not just keeping people organized. The Levites are basically the hazard management team.
They are the buffer zone.
Yes. They are the buffer zone between the pure, raw holiness of the creator of the universe and the mortal, flawed humanity of the Israelites.
I love that so much. It is not about God being petty. It is about the actual physics of the divine. The Creator's life-generating presence is literally moving into their neighborhood. So if you want that life-giving power at the center of your community, you have to maintain an environment that can actually house it.
It makes total sense.
The camp has to be pure. The protocols have to be followed. Otherwise, as the text warns repeatedly, his holy presence could break out and consume them.
And it is just so easy to maintain that perfect, pristine camp when you are standing completely still.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like when you finally clean your entire house on a Saturday morning. You vacuum, you put the laundry away, you sit down with a cup of coffee, and everything is at peace. God is at the center.
It's a beautiful moment.
But then Monday morning hits. You actually have to start living. You have to leave the house, and total chaos ensues.
And that transition from the perfect theory to the messy reality is exactly what happens in chapter 10.
The cloud starts moving.
Yes. The cloud of God's presence, which has been resting over the tabernacle, this visible sign of the reactor core, it lifts. It begins to move.
God is signaling that it is time to march away from Mount Sinai.
Right. They are heading into the desert of Paran. They are finally on the move to the promised land.
And it falls apart with almost comical speed.
Okay.
I mean, they haven't even been walking that long.
Barely a few days, really.
And by chapter 11, the people are already having a collective meltdown. And what are they complaining about?
The menu.
The menu. It is just wild to me.
Specifically, they are tired of manna, which is the miraculous bread God has been providing from heaven every single morning for them.
Literally bread falling from the sky to keep them alive.
Right. And let's just look at the psychology here because it is fascinating. They say, we remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna.
It is insane. They are literally romanticizing their slavery because the food was more flavorful.
It is a profound commentary on human nature, honestly. They are experiencing this sensory deprivation in the wilderness, and they are completely willing to trade their hard-won freedom and their relationship with God just to have some garlic and onions.
Just for some seasoning.
They miss the predictability of Egypt. Slavery was brutal, obviously, but it was predictable. Freedom, where you are relying on God for your daily survival, is terrifying.
And it's so close to home. How often do we want to go back to toxic situations just because they're familiar?
Exactly. And it is not just the everyday people in the camp complaining either. The rot goes straight to the top of the leadership.
Yeah, in chapter 12, things get really ugly. Moses' own siblings, Aaron the high priest and Miriam the prophetess, his absolute inner circle, they turn on him.
His own flesh and blood.
Right. They start bad-mouthing him, ostensibly criticizing his choice of a Cushite wife. But really, if you read it, it is just a blatant power grab.
Oh, 100%.
They say, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us?
Which is such a classic mechanism of elite infighting. When the population is stressed and resources feel scarce, the leadership fractures.
It happens in every organization.
Yep. But God steps in immediately to vindicate Moses. He strikes Miriam temporarily with a skin disease, which actually forces the whole camp to just halt their journey for a week.
Everything grinds to a halt because of this rebellion.
Right. But the damage is done. The unity of the leadership is broken. And this rapid, steep decline we are seeing sets the stage for the absolute climax of their failure in chapters 13 and 14.
The story of the 12 spies. This is the big one.
This is the turning point of the whole book.
So they finally arrive at the edge of the wilderness of Paran, which is essentially the border of the Promised Land. And God tells Moses to send out 12 men, one leader from each tribe, to scout the land of Canaan.
They go in for 40 days, and when they come back, they bring this massive cluster of grapes, proving the land is incredibly fertile, just like God promised.
Flowing with milk and honey.
Exactly. But 10 of the spies bring a report that completely shatters the nation's fragile psyche.
They are just terrified.
They look at the fortified cities and the Canaanites, and they tell everyone, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them.
You know, I think we give those 10 spies too hard of a time in Sunday school.
Oh, so?
We paint them as just these weak cowards who made things up. But from a purely logical military standpoint, they were being entirely rational.
That is a very fair point.
They were a nation of former brickmakers living in tents. The Canaanites had fortified massive walled city-states and advanced weaponry. The spies weren't hallucinating the danger. The giants were real.
You are exactly right. Their assessment of the physical reality was 100% accurate.
So where did they go wrong?
Their failure wasn't in their military intelligence. Their failure was in their spiritual mathematics.
Spiritual mathematics. I like that.
They factored in the walls, they factored in the giants, and they factored in their own weakness. But they completely left God out of the equation.
They forgot the nuclear reactor in the middle of their camp.
Exactly. Only 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, actually factor God in. They stand up against the crowd and say, if the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land. Do not be afraid.
But the voices of fear outvote the voices of faith 10-2. And it gets so bad. The text says the entire assembly raised their voices and wept aloud all night.
A total panic attack.
Yeah, and they actually start planning a full-on mutiny. They say, let's choose a leader and go back to Egypt.
It is the ultimate betrayal.
It really is. God has just spent a year building this relationship, proving himself, and the moment they face real opposition, they want to crawl back into the chains of their abusers.
What is so fascinating here is how the biblical authors chose to arrange this material.
The way it is written, you mean?
Yeah. This entire section of rebellion we just covered isn't just a random assortment of historical anecdotes thrown together. It is highly structured using a literary device common in the ancient Near East called a chiasm.
A chiasm. Okay, wait. Why format it like a mirror? Is that just an author showing off their literary skills? Or is there a functional purpose for a chiasm?
Oh, It serves two massive purposes. First, you have to remember that this was an oral culture.
Right, they did not have printed books.
Exactly. Before everyone had a printed Bible or a smartphone, these texts were memorized and recited aloud. A mirrored, symmetrical structure makes a massive block of text much easier to memorize.
That makes total practical sense.
But more importantly, a chiasm acts like a giant neon arrow pointing straight to the most important part of the story.
How does it do that?
Well, in a chiasm, you present a series of events, and then you repeat similar events in reverse order. Whatever sits right in the dead center is the thesis. It is the theological core of the entire text.
Okay, so how does that map onto these rebellion stories in Numbers? Walk us through the mirror.
All right, there are 7 distinct rebellions mapped out in this section. First, on the outer edge, the people complain about hardships, and God sends fire.
Okay, that is step 1.
Second, moving inward, they complain about food, wanting the meat of Egypt, and God sends quail.
Right, the garlic and onions crowd.
Third, we have the leadership challenge from Miriam and Aaron that we just talked about.
Okay, getting closer to the center.
Then we hit the exact center, the thesis. The story of the 12 spies refusing to enter the land.
The ultimate failure to trust.
Yes, and after that, the mirror begins in reverse. Fourth, moving outward again, we get another, even more severe leadership rebellion led by a man named Korah, which mirrors Miriam and Aaron.
Oh, wow, I see it.
Fifth, matching the food complaint, they complain again about a lack of water, and Moses strikes the rock.
Wow.
And finally, matching the first story of fire, the people rebel and God sends fiery serpents.
That is incredible. So the structure itself is explicitly telling us that the 12 spies incident is the turning point of the whole book.
It is the hinge everything swings on.
And God's reaction to this center point rebellion is just devastating. He is angry, obviously. But what strikes me the most is that he doesn't coerce them.
No, he does not.
He doesn't forcefully march them across the border into Canaan against their will. He actually respects their terrible choice.
That is the tragic respect God has for human agency. If they refuse to trust him for the promised land, he will not force them to inhabit it.
He lets them have what they asked for.
Exactly. He sentences that adult generation, everyone who is 20 years old or older, the ones counted in that very first census, to wander in the wilderness for 40 years until they pass away.
A 40-year death sentence, basically.
Yes. Only their children, the ones they ironically claimed would be taken as plunder by the Canaanites, will get to enter the land.
That number, 40, is just everywhere in this text. The spies were in the land for 40 days, which translates directly to a 40-year sentence.
And Moses waited 40 days on Mount Sinai.
Right. And while he was up there, the people failed and built the golden calf. The biblical authors are clearly using this number to flag something for us.
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture of biblical literature, 40 is the standard metric for a profound period of testing.
Like a crucible.
Yes, it represents a duration of time where a person or a nation's loyalty, faith, and character are squeezed and put under extreme pressure by God.
And this is where the text demands something from you, the person listening to this right now.
This is where it gets personal.
It really does. You might be in the middle of your own 40-day or 40-year wilderness right now.
So true.
You might be staring at the edge of a new calling, a new relationship, or a massive life transition. And all you can see are the giants.
The obstacles in the way.
The medical diagnosis, the financial ruin, the fear of failure. And the question this book asks you is, are you going to let the voices of fear outvote the voices of faith?
Are you going to be the 10 spies or the 2?
Exactly. Are you going to retreat back to the predictable misery of your past? Or are you going to trust that the God who brought you out into the wilderness is strong enough to bring you in to the promise?
It is a terrifying question. Because as we see in the narrative, retreating has catastrophic consequences.
Before we get into the fallout of that decision, I just want to take a quick second. We all go through our own wilderness seasons. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment on this video, sharing a time you faced a wilderness moment in your life and how God provided for you.
It is so encouraging to read those stories.
It really is. And while you are down there, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss our next deep dive into the Word.
Awesome.
So getting back to the text, the fallout of their decision not to enter the land ripples through the rest of the book.
It just gets worse.
Because the descent doesn't stop with the spies. The chiasm structure we just talked about moves us right into the most severe mutiny in the entire camp, which is the rebellion of Korah.
Yes, chapter 16.
Let's spend some time on Korah, because this story is just wild. Korah is a Levite.
Right, he is part of the inner circle.
He is part of the hazard management team for the tabernacle. He is not some marginalized peasant on the outskirts of the camp. He already has immense privilege. So why does he start a mutiny?
It is precisely because he is so close to the power that he wants more of it.
Ah, human ambition.
Exactly. The mechanism of this rebellion is pure political ambition masked as populism.
How does he frame it?
Korah gathers 250 well-known community leaders, including Dathan and Abiram from the tribe of Reuben. They confront Moses and Aaron, and their argument sounds incredibly persuasive on the surface.
What do they say?
They say, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?"
I mean, it sounds like a great democratic argument, right?
It really does.
Hey, Moses, you said God loves all of us, so why are you and Aaron acting like you are the only ones in charge?
But it is a total manipulation. Korah doesn't want equality. He wants Aaron's job as the high priest.
He wants the top spot.
Yes. He is exploiting the people's trauma and disappointment over being sentenced to 40 years in the wilderness to stage a coup.
He is using their pain for political gain.
And Moses is absolutely gutted by this. He falls face down. But then he proposes a test. He says, tomorrow, everyone bring their censers, the fire pans used for burning incense, and let God choose who is actually holy.
And the result of this test is the stuff of nightmares.
It is terrifying.
The glory of the Lord appears, and God tells Moses and the rest of the camp to literally step away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram.
Get as far away as possible.
Moses says, if these men die a natural death, then God hasn't sent me. But if the earth opens its mouth and swallows them, you will know they have treated the Lord with contempt.
And before he even finishes the sentence,
The ground literally splits apart.
it is a terrifying display of divine judgment. The earth swallows the rebels, their families, and all their possessions.
Just gone.
And fire comes out from the Lord and consumes the 250 men who are offering the incense.
We have to talk about the mechanics of this, because to a modern reader, this just sounds like an incredibly violent, angry God throwing a massive tantrum.
It was a very jarring text for modern sensibilities.
Why the earth swallowing them? Why not just strike them with lightning or a plague? Why open the ground?
Because it is a profound theological statement about creation and decreation.
Decreation.
Yes. In the ancient biblical worldview, God's act of creation in Genesis was all about bringing order out of chaotic waters and chaotic earth. He established boundaries so life could flourish.
He separated the land and the sea.
Right. Korah's rebellion was an attempt to completely dismantle the order and the boundaries God had set for the community. By trying to seize the priesthood, Korah was introducing catastrophic chaos into the nuclear reactor of the camp. So God's judgment is an act of anti-creation.
He undoes creation.
Exactly. He removes the boundary of the solid earth, returning them to chaos. It is God definitively stating that his chosen leadership structure is not up for democratic debate, because the survival of the entire nation depends on that exact structure.
It is intense, and it just proves that no one is immune to the pressures of the wilderness. Not the everyday people, not the privileged Levites. And as we move into chapter 20, we see that not even the greatest spiritual leader of them all is immune.
Yeah, this is one of the most heartbreaking chapters in the whole Bible.
It really is. The Israelites have arrived in the desert of Zin. Miriam, Moses' sister, dies and is buried there.
So Moses is already grieving. He is exhausted.
And immediately, the community gathers against Moses and Aaron because there is no water. They run the exact same script they always do.
Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain or figs, grapevines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink.
The entire generation changed, but the complaint stayed exactly the same.
Nothing changed.
So God tells Moses, take your staff, gather the assembly, and speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water.
Just speak to it.
But Moses, man, after 40 years of dealing with these people, 40 years of their complaints, their mutinies, their sheer stubbornness, he just snaps.
He hits his absolute breaking point.
He gathers the people, and instead of speaking to the rock like God asked, he shouts at them in pure rage. He says, listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock?
And he raises his arm and strikes the rock twice with his staff.
And water does gush out.
Yes, God, in his immense mercy, still provides for the thirsty, undeserving people.
But the consequence for Moses is immediate, and it is harsh. God tells him, because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them.
He loses his entry ticket. Moses is banned from the promised land.
Let's be completely real for a second. To almost anyone reading this today, that feels incredibly petty on God's part.
It really does seem unfair at first glance.
The man gave up his entire life. He endured decades of psychological torture from this stiff-necked nation. He loses his temper one time, he hits a rock instead of talking to it, and God shatters his life's dream. How do we even reconcile that?
It is deeply uncomfortable, and you are right to feel the weight of it. It feels disproportionate if we only view it as a momentary lapse of anger.
Which is how most of us view it.
But we have to go back to your nuclear reactor analogy.
Okay, bring it back.
Moses wasn't just a frustrated middle manager. He was the mediator of the covenant. He was the singular representative of God's holiness to the people. When God said, "Speak to the rock," he was setting up a scenario to demonstrate his effortless, gracious provision.
But Moses messed that up.
By striking the rock violently, and more importantly by saying, "Must we bring you water?" Moses committed a massive theological violation.
The "we" is the problem there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He inserted himself into the Godhead. He claimed the miraculous power as his own doing, and he made God look angry and violent when God was trying to be gracious.
He completely misrepresented the core character of God to the people.
Precisely. God's standard for leadership is terrifyingly high. When you are given the highest level of clearance in the reactor, your mistakes have catastrophic blast radiuses.
That makes total sense.
Moses broke the protocol. He dishonored the holiness of God in front of the entire nation. It is a tragic reality that familiarity with God does not give us a license to disrespect his holiness. Moses' consequences were severe because his calling was severe.
The psychological devastation Moses must have felt is just staggering. To know you brought them all the way to the edge, but you cannot cross over.
It is a heavy, heavy lesson.
And the wild stories just keep coming. Right after this, in chapter 21, the Israelites are on the move again, and guess what?
Let me guess, they complain.
They get impatient and complain about the food and the water again.
Unbelievable.
And this time God allows a very strange judgment to fall on them. Venomous snakes come into the camp and bite the people, and many die.
The Hebrew text calls them fiery serpents, likely referring to the burning sensation of their venom.
The people realize they have sinned. Finally, they repent, and they beg Moses to pray for them. Moses intercedes, but God's remedy is completely unexpected. He doesn't just vaporize the snakes.
No, he tells Moses to make a bronze snake and mount it on a pole. The promise is that anyone who's bitten can just look at this bronze snake and they will live. They will be healed of the venom.
Now, I have a massive theory about this. I want you to validate this or tell me I am crazy.
I am ready.
A snake.
Mm-hmm.
The last time a major snake was featured in the biblical narrative, it was the villain in the Garden of Eden.
The ultimate bad guy.
It was the absolute symbol of deception, rebellion, and death. Why on earth would God use the ultimate symbol of evil and judgment as a healing tool? That seems incredibly contradictory to me.
You are not crazy at all. You are hitting on a profound theological mechanism here.
Okay, explain it to me.
It is not a contradiction. It is the ultimate expression of how God's covenant faithfulness operates. God's justice is real, right? The snakes are a real consequence for their constant toxic rebellion. But God takes the very instrument of their judgment, the snake, and transforms it into the source of their salvation.
How does that work practically for the Israelites?
Well, think about it. To be healed, an Israelite who is bitten and dying had to physically drag themselves out of their tent, look up at the bronze serpent, and trust God's word.
They had to actually look at the thing killing them.
Yes. It required them to confront their judgment head on. They had to look at the embodiment of their sin and their punishment and believe that God could overcome it.
Why?
It is a mechanism of faith. You do not get saved by ignoring your sin. You get saved by looking at the judgment and accepting God's provided remedy.
Which is exactly why Jesus claims this story for himself.
Precisely. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells Nicodemus, "Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him."
It is the exact same pattern.
Jesus takes the judgment of humanity's sin upon himself on the cross. The cross, which is an instrument of Roman torture and death, becomes the bronze serpent.
It becomes the singular point of healing for anyone willing to look upon it and believe.
Exactly.
Man, that gives me chills. Transforming the symbol of death into the mechanism of life, it is just brilliant.
It is the gospel hidden in numbers.
And as we track with Israel, they finally leave the wilderness and arrive in the plains of Moab, just across the Jordan River from Jericho.
They are so close.
And here, in chapters 22 through 24, the narrative does something completely unexpected. The camera pans completely away from Moses and the Israelites.
We get a totally different perspective.
We get an entire multi-chapter story where Israel isn't even in the room.
We shift to the perspective of Balak, the king of Moab.
And he is terrified.
He looks out over his borders and sees millions of Israelites camped on his land. He knows he cannot defeat them militarily because he has heard what they did to the Egyptians and the Amorites.
So he resorts to spiritual warfare. This is where the ancient hitman I talked about at the very beginning comes in. Balak sends emissaries to a man named Balaam.
Balaam is such a fascinating figure in the ancient Near East.
Who was he exactly?
He is an Aramean sorcerer, a diviner, but he isn't some cheap charlatan doing parlor tricks. In the ancient worldview, a seer of Balaam's caliber was essentially a spiritual weapon of mass destruction.
So he was the real deal.
Yes. Kings would pay absolute fortunes to have men like Balaam pronounce curses on their enemies before a battle, believing the curse would bind the hands of the opposing nation's gods. Balak hires him to curse Israel so he can defeat them.
So Balaam saddles up his donkey and heads toward Moab to collect his massive paycheck. But on the journey, the angel of the Lord stands in the road with a drawn sword to block his path.
But Balaam cannot see him.
Which is so ironic. Balaam, this world-renowned spiritual visionary, the guy gets paid millions to see into the divine realm, is completely blind. He does not see the massive glowing angel with a sword.
But his donkey does.
This is the best part of the whole book. The donkey sees the angel and swerves off the road into a field. Balaam beats the donkey. They get back on the path, which narrows between two vineyard walls.
And the angel appears again.
The donkey sees him, crushes Balaam's foot against the wall trying to squeeze past, and Balaam beats the animal again.
He is getting so angry.
Finally, the path gets so narrow there's no room to turn. The angel stands there and the donkey just collapses under Balaam. Balaam is absolutely furious, beating the animal with his staff. And then God opens the donkey's mouth.
It is amazing.
The donkey actually speaks to him in a human language and says, "What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times?"
It is brilliant biting satire.
Think about the irony here. In Genesis, we had a talking snake that used its words to deceive humanity and destroy life. Here we have a talking donkey whose words are used to preserve life, saving Balaam from getting his head chopped off by the angel.
The contrast is so intentional.
The lowly beast of burden has more spiritual vision and more obedience to God than the supposedly great spiritual expert of the ancient world.
It is God completely mocking the arrogance of human spiritual economies.
I love it. So God finally opens Balaam's eyes. Balaam is terrified and repents. God allows him to continue to Moab, but with a strict mandate. He can only speak the exact words God puts in his mouth.
So Balaam arrives, and King Balak takes him up to a high mountain overlooking the Israelite camp.
Balak builds altars, makes all these sacrifices, and says, "Okay, do your thing, curse them."
But every time Balaam opens his mouth, the Spirit of God overrides his sorcery, and he pours out these massive, poetic, eternal blessings over Israel instead.
Balak must have been so mad.
Oh, he is furious. He moves Balaam to a different mountain, thinking a different angle will help, but it happens 3 separate times. Balaam cannot curse what God has blessed.
He even prophesies about Jesus, doesn't he?
He does. He prophesies about a future Israelite king, a star coming out of Jacob who will crush Moab and bring God's justice to the nations.
If we connect this back to the thesis of the book, this entire sequence is the ultimate picture of God's relentless grace. Think about the simultaneous action happening here.
It is a split-screen moment.
Down in the valley, what are the Israelites doing? Knowing them, they are probably complaining about the heat, grumbling against Moses, rebelling, completely unfaithful, entirely unaware of the spiritual warfare happening on the ridge above them.
Exactly. While they are in the messy valley of their own failures, acting like they always do, God is moving heaven and earth on the mountaintop to protect them.
He's fighting for them.
He is intersecting curses, he is hijacking pagan sorcerers, and pronouncing unshakable blessings over them. His faithfulness operates and protects them even when they are completely unaware of it and completely undeserving of it.
That is just, it takes your breath away, honestly. To know that God is fighting battles for you that you do not even know exist.
It is a beautiful comfort.
Which transitions us perfectly into the final section of the book. The 40 years of wandering finally come to a close. The timeline catches up.
As God declared, that first rebellious generation passes away in the wilderness.
But God's covenant remains intact. He prepares their children, the second generation, to inherit the land.
Chapter 26 opens with the second census. This is the second counting of the men of fading age, numbering the new generation.
which explains the dual counting that gives the book its English name.
Right, numbers.
And as they prepare to cross over, Moses knows his time is up. Because of his failure at the rock, he isn't going with them. But he loves these people. He asks God to appoint a new leader.
He wants someone who will go out before them and come in before them, so the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd.
And God chooses Joshua, which is incredibly fitting because Joshua and Caleb were the only two spies from 40 years prior who actually believed God could deliver the land.
True faithfulness rewarded.
So Moses commissions Joshua in chapter 27. But I noticed something interesting in the text here. Moses led them out of Egypt. Joshua will lead them into the land. But Joshua isn't just a carbon copy of Moses, is he?
No, he is not. And the text is very careful to clarify that Joshua doesn't entirely fill Moses' shoes. Moses imparts some of his authority to Joshua, but the leadership structure is permanently altered. Moses was a singular leader. He was a prophet, a lawgiver, and he spoke with God face to face.
Joshua does not have that.
Joshua does not have that same intimacy. Joshua's authority is actually split. He has to rely on Eleazar the high priest to use the Urim, the sacred lots, to inquire of the Lord.
Why does the author make a point to show that Joshua is a step down from Moses?
Because it leaves the biblical narrative intentionally open-ended. Even as the Israelites stand on the brink of victory, preparing to enter the promised land, the text creates a lingering sense of longing.
Pointing to something better.
Exactly. It leaves the reader looking forward to a future greater prophet like Moses, a true and perfect shepherd who will have unbroken face-to-face communion with the Father.
That points so beautifully to the New Testament and to Jesus. But before we get there, before the book of Numbers closes, I want to jump back in the timeline slightly to talk about something incredibly beautiful tucked away in chapter 6.
Oh, the blessing.
Yes. Before they even left Sinai, God gave the priest a specific blessing to pronounce over the people, the ancient Aaronic priestly blessing.
This is vital. It is one of the most famous poems in the entire Bible.
And from an archaeological standpoint, it is just mind-blowing. In 1979, archaeologists were excavating a series of burial caves in Jerusalem in a place called Kef Hinnom.
This is such a cool discovery.
They found these two tiny, rolled-up silver scrolls. They had to invent a completely new technique just to unroll them without turning the ancient silver to dust.
Because they were so fragile.
Right. And when they finally translated the microscopic Hebrew inscribed on them, they realized what they had found. These silver amulets date back to the 6th century BCE, before the destruction of Solomon's temple.
Which means they are literally the oldest surviving biblical texts we have ever discovered.
Older than the Dead Sea Scrolls by hundreds of years.
And the words etched onto that ancient silver are words that many of us still hear spoken in churches around the world today.
May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May Yahweh lift up his face on you and place on you peace.
It is so powerful.
What does that actually mean, though, in the ancient Hebrew mindset? We hear, make his face shine on you, and it sounds nice, like sunshine or something, but what is the theological weight of that?
In the biblical worldview, for God to hide his face means to withdraw his presence, his protection, and his favor. It means exposure to chaos and death.
Okay, so the opposite of that.
For God to lift up his face and shine his face upon you means to experience his full, unhindered, life-giving presence.
It is a direct beam of his divine attention.
Exactly. It is a call for God to bring his abundance, his absolute security, and his shalom, his deep, holistic, restorative peace.
God explicitly tells Moses in that chapter that by pronouncing this specific blessing, the priests are literally placing God's name upon the Israelites. They are marked by his presence.
That is the ultimate contrast to their constant rebellion. They keep trying to throw off his leadership, but he continually commands his priests to mark them with his name and shine his life-giving face upon them.
And that connects so deeply to you, the person listening right now. When you put your faith in Christ, you carry God's name today. You are marked by his Spirit.
You carry that blessing.
And what this massive, complex book of Numbers tells me is that even when you stumble in your modern-day wilderness, even when you complain about the manna or fear the giants in the land or let your ambition create chaos in your life, God's ultimate desire is to bless you.
His default posture toward you is grace.
That is the core takeaway. The book of Numbers is a profound testament to a God who doesn't force us to follow him.
He allows us the dignity of our choices, even when that means we have to face the brutal consequences of our hard-heartedness.
He lets us wander if we insist on it.
But he never abandons the covenant. His presence continues to lead, graciously providing bread, water, and direction one step at a time until the promise is fulfilled.
It is the messy, beautiful reality of grace. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
I love when we look at how the grand narrative ties together across the centuries.
We spent this entire time talking about the nation of Israel failing their 40-year test in the wilderness. They gave into the temptation to fear. They rebelled against God's leadership. They complained about being hungry and demanded bread on their own terms.
They failed the test repeatedly.
But centuries later, another Israelite stepped into the wilderness. After he was baptized, Jesus Christ was led by the Spirit into the desert for a 40-day test. He faced Satan himself.
The parallels are undeniable. The 40 years of the nation become the 40 days of the Son.
Exactly. But look at the difference in the mechanics of how they handled it. Where the nation of Israel complained about hunger and demanded bread, Jesus, who was literally starving after fasting for 40 days, stood absolutely firm on the word of God.
He did not break.
When Satan tempted him to turn stones to bread, Jesus quoted Deuteronomy, a book born from this wilderness period, saying, "Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God."
He used the wilderness lessons to defeat the enemy.
Where Israel put God to the test at the rock, Jesus refused to test the Father. Where Israel worshipped the golden calf and flirted with pagan gods, Jesus said, "Worship the Lord your God and serve him only."
Jesus succeeded everywhere Israel failed.
He didn't just teach us how to survive the wilderness. He became the ultimate faithful Israelite on our behalf. He passed the wilderness test flawlessly so that he could invite us messy, complaining, fearful wanderers to inherit the ultimate promised land of his kingdom.
When you view it through that lens, it completely changes how you read the Old Testament. It is not just a history of failure. It is a massive neon sign pointing to the necessity of Christ.
It really is. So I want to encourage you today, go read Matthew chapter 4, Luke chapter 4. Read the story of Jesus in the wilderness, but keep this deep dive into the book of Numbers in the back of your mind.
Watch how Jesus redeems that test.
Watch how he rewrites the ending of the wilderness story. I promise you, you will see the desert in a completely new light. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the Word. Keep seeking God in the messy, everyday journey. Remember that his face is shining upon you, and we will catch you next time.